Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into just 3 verses from the Gospel of Matthew. And let me tell you, this short exchange is absolutely packed. It tells us so much about faith, about power, and about temptation. So let's get right into it. Right away, the stage is set for this huge spiritual showdown. But the weapon of choice here is really subtle, and that's what makes it so fascinating. This isn't just good versus evil in a straightforward fight. It's about truth versus a twisted version of the truth. So what actually happens when the devil starts quoting scripture? Let's break this down verse by verse. So our story starts with a big change of scenery. The battleground moves from that lonely wilderness to the absolute heart of Jewish spiritual life. And it happens at a truly terrifying altitude. Now, to really get the weight of this moment, you have to picture the scene. The pinnacle of Herod's temple, well, this wasn't just some high balcony. It was most likely the very edge of a portico that looks straight down into the Kidron Valley. We're talking a drop of hundreds of feet. The historian Josephus even said it was so dizzyingly high that your head would swim just looking down. So this location wasn't random at all. It was chosen for maximum public visibility and maximum physical danger. The text Satan taketh him up. And people have debated what this actually means for centuries. Was it a literal, physical transportation? Or maybe a spiritual vision, kind of like the ones the prophet Ezekiel had? Or, and this one is really interesting, was it a powerful psychological suggestion? We can't know for sure, of course, but that third option really gets to the heart of the danger here. The planting of a single, powerful idea, that temptation to prove yourself with one spectacular act. So, with the stage set perfectly, the tempter makes his move. And this is where things get incredibly clever. Satan just watched Jesus use scripture to shut down the first temptation. So what does he do? He decides to use the exact same weapon right back at him. Just listen to the taunt that kicks it all off. If thou be the Son of God. That little word, if, is a direct challenge to his entire identity. And then comes the real masterstroke of manipulation. Satan quotes Psalm 91, a beautiful, powerful promise of God's protection. And he twists it into a dare. He's basically saying, go on. If you are really who you say you are, prove it. Make God save you in a way everyone can see. And this really lays out the two completely opposite ideas at play here. On one side, you have Satan, pushing for this big public spectacle, using divine power to create a sign and basically force people to believe. But the promise in Psalm 91 was never, ever about that. It's a promise of protection for people who are already walking in obedience to God's will, not for people who are going to recklessly test him just to put on a show. All right, so this is the climax of the duel. Satan has used scripture to build this perfect little trap, and now Jesus responds with scripture to completely dismantle it. It's just a perfect demonstration of spiritual clarity. I mean, this is a masterclass. Jesus doesn't even get into an argument about the real meaning of Psalm 91. He doesn't need to. He just hits back with a higher guiding principle from Deuteronomy. Thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. The point is so clear. You don't put God in a position where he's forced to perform a miracle to prove himself, or, frankly, to save you from your own presumption. But here's what's so interesting. This specific temptation, this urge to prove his identity with some kind of dramatic sign, it didn't just vanish after this moment on the pinnacle. Not at all. In fact, it was a theme that would follow him all throughout his ministry. I mean, just look at what happened in his own hometown of Nazareth. A crowd gets so angry, they drag him to the brow of a hill to throw him off a cliff. It's like a real-world replay of the pinnacle temptation. This was his chance, right? He could have miraculously survived, proved his power to them all. But what does he do instead? He simply passed through the midst of them and went his way. Once again, he completely refused the spectacle.
And that's the beautiful irony, isn't it? The promise that Satan misused from Psalm 91, that angels would bear him up, it was absolutely real, but it was fulfilled on God's terms. It was fulfilled in those quiet moments when Jesus escaped angry crowds in Nazareth or Jerusalem, not with some flashy miracle, but with the divine power that allowed him to just keep going with his obedient mission.
So when you boil this whole encounter down, what are we left with? Well, it's a profound lesson about the nature of true power versus the temptation of just putting on a performance. This right here is the core takeaway. Jesus' refusal to jump wasn't a sign of weakness or doubt. It was a demonstration of incredible strength. True divine power doesn't need to put on a show.
It operates in perfect alignment with the Father's will, and it's grounded in humility and obedience, not in some desperate need for public approval.
You know, at the end of the day, the temptation on the pinnacle had very little to do with jumping or falling. The real test was about identity. Was Jesus going to validate himself with a spectacular sign on the enemy's terms, using the enemy's methods? Or was he going to find his validation solely in his relationship with and obedience to the Father? He chose the latter. And that brings this ancient story right into our world today. It leaves us with a really important question to think about. In our own lives, in our careers, our relationships, our faith, how often are we tempted to perform a pinnacle jump? How does that temptation to prove ourselves, to demand a sign, or to seek validation on the world's terms, how does that show up in our lives today?